Hey, Chris, we need your audio, sir. Sorry, bud. Going to add myself to the stream. Good evening. Just going to wait till I get Chris's audio here. See, we got a few people watching. Hope you've met Dr. Zama on our show. Sorry, Chris, I can't hear you, sir. All right, Chris is going to rejoin us. Dr. Zama, just me and you right now, so I'm going to tell the good folks watching what to do. If they can, I'm going to type a comment here in the description. So people are going to leave their comments in the comment box here, and I'm going to put them up on screen. Chris is going to read them, and we'll be good to go.
Okay.
So hello, people out there. Say hello to me in the comments here. I'm going to say hello to you right now. Hey, everyone. Put your questions for Dr. Zama. Hi, Charlie. How are you? In the comments. All right, so y'all can hear me. That's good. Let me add Chris to the broadcast.
Any good? Hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
Now you got me. Okay. I don't know why that happened. Sorry, fellas.
I'm going to go away, guys. It's Chris and Dr. Zama. Here we
go. All right.
Doctor, sorry about that. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening. Can you hear me well?
Loud and clear. And my apologies. Don't know why we had the technical snafu, but it's a Monday, so what do you expect, right? Welcome in to this Meet the Candidate series. It's another great night, and I'm so glad to have you here. We have been meeting each and every candidate, trying to introduce you to every candidate running statewide in the Commonwealth. And tonight we're joined by a very interesting gentleman. He was with us on the radio show, I guess maybe a couple of weeks ago now, and I got such feedback and so much interest, and we were eager for tonight because I know you'll have questions for him too. He's running for governor in Pennsylvania. He has a very esteemed and established background in medicine prior to this run, and we're going to hear all from him tonight, and I hope you'll bring your questions. That's primarily why we're here. Just type questions in the comment section below, and I'll ask them for Dr. Nche Zama. Welcome in tonight, sir. Good evening.
Oh, thank you. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
So let me just start by asking, how's the campaign for governor going?
Everything is going well. It's going on schedule. It is physically grueling, and I'm enjoying it. I look at it as though I'm taking my clinic on the road, and so I go and I listen and I learn. You can't fix what you don't understand, so I'm really enjoying it and getting to know the problems of the people in this state.
How long have you been a Pennsylvanian, sir?
I have been in Pennsylvania, most of my career. I moved here in the mid-'90s, and I just haven't left.
So as you have traveled the Commonwealth, has there been a part of it that maybe you've discovered, experienced, interacted with that you maybe hadn't seen before, something you've taken away from the state that maybe you didn't know before?
Well, I think I've been to all 67 counties in this campaign, and I thought I knew the state, but I really didn't to the extent. I mean, it's like 67 different cultures, and all very fascinating. But in the final analysis, I think that variety, not just of geography, of culture, is beautiful, and that's what makes Pennsylvania so unique. And I was born in a village, so I like the rural areas probably more so than the big cities.
Well, let's start with your background, because people that may not know you or not know much about your candidacy, maybe they've not had a chance to get to know you yet. We did talk with you, like I said, on the radio show, and it was a fascinating background. Let's start at the beginning and talk about your career before you decided to run for governor.
Well, so I was born actually in a small grass hut village in Africa. And I grew up in that village, raised by two very strict subsistence farmers who were literate farmers. They were Christian farmers, my mom and dad, raised in the village. And actually, the village raised me. And we lived in a small hut, very loving family atmosphere. And when I was still very young, probably about 4 years or so, my mom sent me to live with my grandmother, who had actually, unfortunately, was a leper. She had leprosy. And in those days, because of the ignorance about leprosy, she was sequestered away from the village to an adjacent village where she lived all by herself. So I went there to help take care of her at a very young age. So I was raised by her, my leper grandmother, for a period of time. And, you know, it was just very traumatic for a child to sit and watch your grandmother, and you'd be sitting and talking to her, and her toes and fingers would really rot up and fall off. And then how she was treated like a pariah in the village. People scorned her, and they ran away when they saw her, and they made funny noises and stuff. And that's where I really learned compassion, true compassion as a child, because I would get angry and she'd look at me and say, son, don't get angry. They're all good people. There's good in everybody. And it molded who I am today. Well, and things were going fine. And ultimately I moved in again with my parents, because the elementary school, I started school about age 3, and it was a very long trek from the village from where I lived with my grandmother. And one day the school shut down, so I moved to another school, maybe about 5 miles, a lot closer to my parents. And so I moved back to my parents' hut. And unfortunately, when I was 10 years old, my mom went to the hospital to give birth. And I got out of school and I heard she wasn't doing well. I ran over to the hospital. It's just a hospital name, actually. It's a Bush hospital. I only had one doctor, and he was tied up somewhere in the province in the mountains. And when I walked into the room, and there was my mother crying, really in pain, and blood flowing out of her groin to the floor, making a puddle. And there was a nurse standing in the corner, and all she kept saying, crying with her arms out in the air, there's no doctor, there's no doctor. And my mom heard my voice, and she goes, son, go home, I'm dying. I remember those words. And I says, mommy, please don't die. Well, soon after that, she died. And so I walked out of the hospital and the trek back to the village, and the words that kept ringing in my ear were the words of the nurse who kept saying, you know, there's no doctor. So I decided that I wanted to be a doctor. And you know, before my mother died, 3 months before, she had witnessed these very handsome kids from an exclusive boarding school run by British missionaries, the Marist brothers, and nicely dressed, you know, in their uniforms. And she looked at me and she goes, that's an excellent school. That's where I want you to go to school. You start seeing the whole concept of school choice. And she couldn't read or write. So she died, and I enrolled in the school, met an American Peace Corps volunteer who took particular interest in my education. And he says, son, if you want to be a doctor, you need to consider going to America, because in America, if you work hard, 2 words, you'll succeed in becoming a doctor. And then 4 years later, I graduated, you know, top of my class, and the villagers got together and donated what amounted to $20. And, you know, my father sold his house, his hut, and got $300 and bought me a one-way ticket to New York. So I arrived here as a teenager, not knowing anybody, in New York City, and there began my academic journey, full of tears and struggles. I worked hard. I lived in the YMCA for a while. A Good Samaritan, a gentleman called Sam, who was still very close friends, and rescued me from the Y, and I lived with him in his 1-bedroom apartment for a year. And then I moved up to Boston, where I pursued my studies in chemistry and wound up getting a bachelor's degree in chemistry. And then I started on a journey that took me to getting a PhD in chemistry, a master's in management from Harvard. And eventually I was trained as a general surgeon at the Cleveland Clinic and educated at Harvard as a cardiothoracic surgeon, pediatric and adult.
Doctor, I hear that story and I have a mix of emotions. It makes me feel emotional, inspired. At the same time, I must say, a little embarrassed about anything I would ever complain about. It makes me realize, one, how blessed I am and we are just to wake up having been born and living in this country every day. I imagine that's tenfold for you, more than most of us can even understand.
Well, I always say there's a God above. You know what I mean? I'm a Christian, I believe in God. And I've always said, you know, as difficult as life can be sometimes, God always plants these angels along the way. And wherever you are in this world, somebody helped you to get there. And I had a lot of good people, you know, from all different tribes and ethnicities, and who just chipped in to help me, or who gave me something to eat. gave me a word of encouragement here and there. And so I owe it to them, you know. And that's why when I graduated and got a job, I decided I wanted to travel the world and do free missionary surgery. And I had trained in Paris when I was at Harvard. I was sent to Paris to train under a famous French surgeon called Carpentier. And while I was there, I discovered that he was a humanitarian surgeon. So a year later, after I graduated, I caught the bug, so to speak, and I traveled, and I've been to Southeast Asia, been to Cambodia doing surgery, Vietnam, all over Africa and South America, and doing pediatric heart surgery and sometimes adults. And also, I believe in educational empowerment. There's nothing more powerful. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if it wasn't for education. And so I've participated in building schools for poor and orphan kids. And I currently support an entire elementary school. A few years ago, my daughter and I were in Africa visiting. And we went to the school where a third of the students drop out because of non-payment of tuition, which is a problem that I had growing up. I got kicked out of school probably no less than 3 times in secondary school. And I would have to go sell mangoes and sell vegetables, whatever I could do to hustle. My parents, my mom had died, my father was sickly and illiterate, and you know, to defray tuition costs. So my daughter and I went to this school, and I decided, you know, I'm gonna provide financial support so any child who attends and can't pay tuition would not have any problems. Not only that, I bought books for all the kids, so a kid can borrow a book for a semester or a term and then return it at the end of the term of the year. And I got a letter that I've saved, it's still very touching, from the headmistress. And a year later, and she says, the enrollment went up 30% and there were no dropouts. You know, nothing could be more, you know, yeah. So I spent US mentoring. I love mentoring. And just this week, my manager and I were driving out somewhere in Pittsburgh, and I received 2 texts from students. One, who's going to be a radiation oncologist at the Cleveland Clinic. I mean, this is somebody I've mentored right here in the Poconos. And another one who is now a neonatal nurse in Baltimore, and when I met. So I believe in educational empowerment, my brother.
Dr. Zama, you mentioned it, I think briefly, at least I heard you mention a daughter. Could you tell us a little, as much as you care to tell us, about your family? You're married, you have at least one child you've mentioned.
So I'm very happily married. My wife and I, we live here in the Poconos. She's in the healthcare business as well. We have 4 children. My oldest daughter, I was married before and divorced. I got married in college. And my oldest daughter, my children, I push education. It's they don't like for me to talk about them, but I'm very proud. She did a PhD as well as a law degree from Madison. She's doing very well, works for the state of Wisconsin. The younger one is a creative writer who studied here in Pennsylvania, lived with me, and also in California and in Spain. She's a creative writer. My son actually loves handicapped kids, so he spends his time working and taking care of handicapped kids. And then we have a 16-year-old, soon to be 17, who's can't wait to be emancipated, and she's just brilliant. And not only that, I'm an African, so when you talk about kids, it's not really biological. Remember the expression, it takes a village to raise a child. My dad was suffering so much when I was a kid in high school. I promised him in secondary school that, Dad, I know we're poor, but someday you don't have to worry. My sister is much more brilliant than I am, my siblings, actually, all of them. But for whatever reason, I was selected to be the one to go to school. And so I promised them that I would educate all their kids. And everybody that knows me knows I have a bunch of nieces and nephews, there's about 24 of them. All of them had a free ride from elementary school through university. We have geologists, MBAs. And so, you know, that's education. They're empowered. And hopefully I planted a seed and we'll have a more bountiful harvest in the future.
That's remarkable. Your siblings, do any of them still live in Africa, or have most of them made their way here with you? Or
they still live in Africa. I have an older sister that I talk to every week. She's illiterate, and she's a farmer, subsistence farmer like my parents. She lives in Africa. Her children are all over the world that I put to school. One in Germany. I got one in Canada. Actually, she graduated from Mansfield University here in Pennsylvania. She was with me, and she's got another one in France. All over the world. She had 5. And then my
That's remarkable. If I may, I don't mean to make this too personal because I do want to get into your campaign, but I'm just fascinated with your story. Your sister that you mentioned, I use your words. You say she's illiterate. Is she aware, one, of what you've become here and the fact that you're running for governor? I mean, does she even understand what that really means?
Well, it's funny because in September of 1994, I took a team to Africa to do pediatric heart surgery. And when I got to Africa and I got done, I went to the village to visit. And I had to sit, my sister was sitting there with my dad right before he died. And I was explaining to him what I did for a living. And, they just know I'm a medicine man, but the mere fact that I had to cut people open, take their hearts out and fix them, my dad says, don't say anymore because the villagers may not want to hear that. They'll think you're some kind of evil man. And so my sister really does not have a conceptual framework of what I do. She just knows I heal people. But her main concern is never what I do professionally, is that I work too hard and I'm too skinny.
If you have a question for Dr. Zama, I hope you'll bring it. We're going to talk a lot tonight about the different issues facing Pennsylvania. And if you have any questions, please just type them in the forum below. Let's just jump right in. I asked you this before. I'll ask again. What was the catalyst? As I understand it now, you've formally retired from your profession, so you decided to run for governor. What was the catalyst? Why did you decide you wanted to do that?
Well, it was actually COVID. And, I was right in the epicenter. I was practicing when COVID came out. And, when you absolutely can't get oxygen, COVID is a problem with the lungs. Your lungs get infected with the virus, and we all need oxygen. But if the lungs are sick from the virus and you can't get oxygen into your system adequately or conveniently, they put a breathing tube in, the ventilator that people talk about. Now, if that's not working and you're dying, you need a heart surgeon because we need to connect you to something called an ECMO, to pump oxygen directly into your bloodstream and remove carbon dioxide. So I was involved in that. And so I was seeing the extremes of COVID. And I happened to have been sitting at home watching TV, and I just saw how things were being mismanaged, in my opinion. And the science was tossed out the window, and it had become so politicized. And I've spent my life as a humanitarian, serving people at the highest level of excellence. And I decided that this was not the excellence that I espouse, and also not the excellence that the people of Pennsylvania deserve. And so I decided I was going to run for governor. I want to be a governor for our children.
Well, let's get right to it. Questions for Dr. Zama. The first one from Linda tonight. As a scientist, going green is the mantra of this current administration. How easy is it really to go green? Can it happen overnight as they make it seem? What do you know about we know how much energy Pennsylvania sits on. We know what the cost of gasoline is and what it costs to heat our homes right now. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm all for science, promoting science. Energy has become a controversial issue, but it's been politicized. I want to be a governor that takes politics out of energy. And I have always with me, I'm going to share it with you here, this bush lamp. When this lamp was lit in the hut, every night it allowed me to do homework for at least 2 hours under the watchful eyes of my parents. And when they couldn't afford the kerosene, we were plunged into a deep darkness in that hut in the village. And thank goodness for the deep darkness, I couldn't see the pain in my parents' faces when the little boy who loved school so much, they'd been infected by this academic bug because I was so enthusiastic about my studies. But if I couldn't do my homework, it was extremely painful to them. And our family couldn't see each other and converse and share love. And mother had difficulty cooking that night because she couldn't see very well. Energy decisions must be based on humanity, not politics. And so when I say that, the point I'm making is energy has been politicized in our state. We're sitting here beneath our feet under one of the largest resources on the planet. We're only second to Saudi Arabia. And within the United States, I say second to Texas. We're an energy powerhouse. We're like number 4 in the world who are a country for gas, natural gas. And so energy has to be considered, and I've said time and again, on as economic imperative, because we need that to build our economy, to subsidize some of the needs in our pillars of government. Secondarily, there has to be a social imperative. People are paying huge amounts of money. Right here in Pennsylvania, there are people who are freezing tonight because they can't afford to heat their homes. That's the human aspect of energy. And then there's I don't like to say political imperative, I say the security imperative. That's how you gotta look at issues. If Russia is supplying energy to Massachusetts and New England, and we're right here, see what has happened to Germany. We're being held hostage, but we have the ability to take care of ourselves on our own. And we're going to Venezuela asking for help with energy and Saudi Arabia. That's not stupid. It's insane as far as I'm concerned as a scientist. Now, it's not either or. You can't say energy, but we got to protect our environment. And I think you can do both simultaneously just as well. We have the technology and the wherewithal to do that. The people in Indiana County, in Washington, Greene, I've visited all these counties. They love the environment just like you and I do. They want to drink clean water. I want to drink clean water. I don't know about you, And so we have the abilities to protect our environment, the science and the technology, and utilize what God gave us. But I don't stop there. I'm also a scientist. I understand that hydrocarbons may not feature as much in the future. So as we anticipate that future, I want Pennsylvania to be number 1 in clean energy research. But we know that it's not ready for prime time. And just a couple of months ago, California spent over $243 million building about 83 windmills. And when the math was done, it would only provide about 0.43, and I repeat, 0.43% of the electrical needs of Los Angeles. My brother, our great industries in Pennsylvania right now cannot run on windmills. We have to evolve that technology to a point where it's ready for prime time. But see what has just happened with the war. It's unveiled a huge deficiency in our thinking and our policies. I think it's time that Pennsylvania gets critical thinkers, high-performance teams to run the state.
Your questions for Dr. Zama, keep them coming.
Real briefly for a second. We're clearing off vast swaths of land in Pennsylvania to install solar cells. The vast majority of the parts on those solar cells don't come from America. That's a security imperative right there. Think about it. The batteries, I love electric cars. I think that's an evolving technology. But 70% of our lithium comes from Chile and other parts from Africa. We're having to dig up and disrupt geographies to mine these minerals, And on top of that, the ultimate sink for carbon dioxide on the planet is vegetation, trees. You're clearing them, and so all the CO2 that's being emitted, I'm letting off tons of carbon dioxide talking to you as part of my metabolism. And there are no trees to absorb this. Trees need it because they need carbon dioxide to make glucose. Carbon dioxide plus water gives you glucose. So you see the idiosyncrasies in and the schizophrenia in many of our decisions.
I love it. Sounds like you've got a firm grasp on it as far as I can see. Dr. Nche Zama, if you have questions for him, keep them coming. Ragnar has one. How would Dr. Zama handle Act 77, voter integrity? How does he feel about the mail-in vote? We talked about this during our first visit. I think I asked you, and I think you confirmed this is the issue as you travel the Commonwealth that maybe you hear about more than anything else.
Yes. And I always like to look at problems from a historical perspective, and then contemporary data, and then down the line in the future, the effect of decisions that are made. And historically, I believe I'm the only one running who's actually lived in a socialist environment where somebody's ballot doesn't count, a dictatorship. That's where I was born. And my parents were arrested from that hut. And I detailed this in the book that I wrote, Mommy, Please Don't Die, the title, actually, this book. And my parents were arrested, thrown in jail. We were lost in that hut because we had an uncle who was agitating for a strange philosophy called democracy. And he was agitating, leading marches, and the government sent somebody to come and arrest him and kill him. They came, he got wind of it and left under cover of darkness and escaped to Ghana and then on to Yugoslavia or somewhere. He's still alive. And when they couldn't find him, they arrested my parents. They were tortured, and my mother was raped. And I detailed out in my book. That's the world that I came from. Nothing erodes the democratic process as we know it than when an individual's vote does not count, or at least they get the impression that their vote no longer counts. Nothing erodes democracy. And we will be destroyed as Americans if the electoral process is not addressed concertatively and seriously, because that's what undergirds our democracy. And so from that preface, I would say in Pennsylvania, in 2020, whatever happened, I've said, hey, in medicine, when somebody dies, what do we do in the hospital? Instead of sitting around, and perseverating in it and, talking nonsense, we do an autopsy to be able to ascertain what went wrong. So we need to investigate whatever irregularities were there, because this process is so important to us. It's not a Democratic problem, an independent problem, or a Republican problem. It's a people problem. Government of the people, for the people, and by the people. And therefore, what I would do as governor, and something basic, low-hanging fruit, get an ID. If there's concerns that people who are not legal residents of voting, you need an ID to buy alcohol and a bunch of things, that may be injurious to your health. Voting is not going to hurt you, with an ID, getting an ID to vote. We need IDs, voter IDs, not such a big deal. Secondarily, the Constitution of Pennsylvania, and it's in simple English, I challenge anybody to read it, spells out specific exceptions for not voting in person. So Act 77 that liberalized that, we discovered later that it could have been, a culprit, a risk factor for some of the irregularities that we saw in the election. So that has to be overturned. I know the Commonwealth Court, tendered a decision, and now it's with the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. But we should avoid mail-in ballots. People need to go there and drop in the ballot. And then there's the science part of it. I talked to a gentleman who was running for Secretary of State of Arizona last summer. And there are electronic ballots that are in the process in development now. We need to start looking at those down the line for the future. Because whether you live in Warren County, Monroe, whether you live in Pike, Bradford, Philadelphia, Allegheny, your vote must count. We're in America, a democracy.
Dr. Zama, Katie asks, Pennsylvania has some of the worst roads in the country. How would you improve on road and bridge conditions and improve efficiency when it comes to state-run agencies like PennDOT?
Yes. PennDOT is sick, just like a lot of this state. And I say it needs a doctor because they're so sick. There's too much politics in PennDOT. I will be the governor that takes politics out of PennDOT. We're about an $800 billion economy. We're not poor. Understand? If we were a country, we would be number 16, 17, 18, or 19, given the vagaries of global economies, in light of recent COVID crisis and whatnot. So we're not. In many ways, we're mismanaged, the various pillars of our government, and we know that. They're overbloated. I ran a heart program in the Poconos, and I challenge anybody to challenge this. We were one of the lowest costs, not one of them, the lowest cost in Pennsylvania with the best outcomes. You can run a very efficient system. We need to take politics out of PennDOT because those back roads don't bode well for our economy. And so when you look at how things run in Harrisburg, in heart surgery, as a leader, and I've been a leader in the healthcare industry for many, many years, we have to have outcome metrics that are agreed upon. And every quarter or so, we have to go back and look at your performance metrics. I want to institute that in every pillar of our government so you know where every dime of your money is going. Now, I'm financially literate, not just because I have a master's in management, but because I have been responsible not just for the clinical dashboard, for the financial dashboard in the institutes that I've run. So, proper fiscal management, meticulous fiscal management in a leadership is what Pennsylvania needs, and we wouldn't have to be worrying about the roads. There was a little girl in Perry County last summer at a vineyard event that I attended. This little girl couldn't have been more than 8, 9, 10 years old, walked up to me and spontaneously made a statement that still hurts thinking about it. She goes, "Dr. Zama, when you're governor, can you please fix the roads in my neighborhood?" And I got home that night, I'm thinking, this poor girl probably has to every morning take the bus to school and all the bumps. And we live in America, 2022, my brother. We shouldn't be discussing this. Well, I'll be the governor, just like heart surgery. When you grab the scalpel, you own the outcome. When you grab the scalpel, you only have one chance to do it. When you grab the scalpel, you have to embrace nothing but excellence. And with a high-performance team, we will be able to address that.
If you have a question for Dr. Zama, keep them coming. Jason just said hello to my friend, the doc. Please let us know about your amazing education plans for our great Commonwealth. You led with this in your own personal story. Education is critically important to you. Do you have a vision or thoughts about the state of education here in Pennsylvania?
Yes. I've learned something about politics. I'll never be a politician. I'm a heart surgeon, and I want to be the governor that I've been as a heart surgeon. I have to preface that to make a point. Everybody uses this whole education thing as a sound bite. My brother, I never had a bus to take me to school. I walked through the jungle. I got bitten by snakes. I didn't have food to eat. I climbed a tree and harvested oranges and mangoes to eat. And this is not unique. A lot of kids who grew up with me and went to school experienced that. I have experienced education like you dissect a substance down to the atom and the nucleus and the protons and neutrons, the details of it. And I put myself through school, worked. So I appreciate the value of education, and I want that value to be real for our children. But when you look at our educational process system, it's been failing. Pennsylvania has been scoring down at the bottom consistently for years. Everybody knows this, who is in the know. And the problem we have, I've described, and some people have hijacked the expression, is zip code disease. Well, as a doctor, I would look at it that way. Some zip codes have consistently performed poorly over the years. And our educational system is not bringing value to children from those communities. But they're all our children, whether they're in Erie, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Allegheny County, or in Stroudsburg, or in Sayre, Pennsylvania. They're all Potter County. They're all our children. So what I want to do is, first of all, as well, take politics out of education. We have to have performance metrics in our educational systems to meet. There are many challenges, and it's a a multifactorial, the problems within education, which have to be addressed. I will have a high performance team for education because we're in a knowledge-based global economy. And you need a high performance team to be able to address concertedly the problems within education and attain long-term solutions. So one, school choice, I believe is extremely important. My literate mother knew the importance of school choice, and yet people debate about it here. It doesn't mean that we abandon our public schools, no. We just make them better, and the teachers there, or those involved, the stakeholders, have a fiduciary responsibility for excellence, and we'll have performance metrics and measures. So we're not just pumping millions. Guess what? This year, we're going to be increasing our funding to at least kindergarten by about 10% plus, to about 11 point something, I think $11.8 billion total. And higher education, few more billions. Well, that's your money, that's my money, that's the taxpayers' money. I want to know where that money is going and what the outcomes are. If I ran a heart institute like this, I'd be hanging from a tree. You understand? And so, school choice and vocational schools. Not every child needs to go through this classical pathway of high school to college. We need welders, we need mechanics, we need electricians, plumbers. And it'll probably take them a lot less time to earn a reasonable income and have a better sense of self than it would be to have gone through a PhD. And I'm not downing any specialty in history. It's like something like that. Let's be pragmatic. I will be a governor that supports that and have a vocational school within an hour's drive of every county. We can do it. And then I take that further. Our children need to strive for excellence. A lot of poor kids, Black kids, Hispanic kids, Native American kids, because they happen to show up in greater numbers in those school districts that are suffering. The system has gotten them conditioned to accept this philosophy of low expectation. I have mentored and tutored those kids. Well, I'll be the governor that on every podium now, in every classroom, pushes excellence. We keep talking about diversity, this, that, and other. That's not doing those kids any favors. I want my child to be excellent. That should be a priority. And then you can talk about diversity. Diversity beautifies excellence. And as I've said 1,000 times, on a scale of desirable goals, every child on planet Earth, any day, excellence trumps diversity. And I said before, this world right now is a knowledge-based global economy. We've passed the Industrial Revolution. My leaders, wake up. And if I'm competing with China. My daughters, my son, they're competing with China. My nieces, nephews, all the kids, they're competing with India, Germany. And guess what? When you're competing on an international stage, do they ask you what your race is? No. There's no affirmative action in global commerce. I keep saying. We need a transformative, disruptive leader because we're in the wrong road right now. And I was reading an article, I have to share this with you. It says, China's school kids beat American students in all academic categories. And yet we have politicians with their sound bites that keep doing the same thing, saying the same thing. We keep electing the same people year in and year out, expecting a different outcome. Well, if there's one legacy I and you and many others who are like-minded want to lead, is to disrupt the educational system. So from now on, it has meaning to a child. So a little boy who grew up in a grass hut, who more often than not ran around naked, can graduate from Harvard and be able to travel the world and save lives. I want those kids to be just as empowered and much more than I have been. And then I've left a better legacy.
Dr. Nche Zama with your questions tonight here on Meet the Candidates. Lindsay says, hello, Dr. Zama. It seems like everything got worse when the pandemic hit, including an increase in addiction, relapse, and overdoses. How can you help Pennsylvania combat the opioid epidemic that doesn't seem to be getting any better? Yeah, drug and alcohol dependency. We know a lot of fentanyl coming across our southern border. What about the opioid epidemic in medicine? Does medicine formally have its hands around it, I guess? And then we'll broaden it out to sort of the illegal element.
Yes. So every problem that we seek to solve as leaders, we must first address the root cause of it. And the politicians' answers are usually for quick fixes. There's not a quick fix here. We have to look at why this problem has been exacerbated. As a doctor, I've seen people come in dead. I've seen some come in dying, and we resuscitate them from drug abuse or drug overdose. This has been exacerbated by the COVID scourge in the past couple of years. And why is that? Well, some of the federal government policies, leadership by fear. Just go back and look at the clips from television just a few months ago. Fear, 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 fear. And guess what that does? Anybody with a proclivity for that, using drugs, it puts them in a worse high-risk category. And they shut down our businesses. So if you're a business owner, you might as well be dead. And in despair, what do? People can't work, they can't find meaningful employment. The psychologists have told us over the years, you and I go to work not to earn an income, but have a better sense to feel good, feel a sense of worth. You've destroyed that in the inner city. You've destroyed it among the poor. You've destroyed it across vast swaths of this state. So the apathy has led people to what? Seek sanctuary or refuge in chemicals, in drugs. So that's one of the causes. And so education, homeschooling, an educational system that is grossly unfair. There's a massive canyon of achievement between the haves and the have-nots. And those kids in the inner city who had no access to broadband internet, the educational careers were disrupted. And so you see the despair within conflicts, within family settings and situations. What do? Their drug use starts or becomes exacerbated, and things just get worse. So the social determinants of this drug use have to be addressed. Now, some of them, the virus is going to end. And if our leaders learn anything from that moving forward, we should address it. And so also crime has gone up during this time, even though people were getting a ton of money. So they're not breaking windows to steal something because they can't afford to buy it. They got the money. But you go, this is warped psychology. You've got free money, you're awash with free money, but you're still going out and committing crimes. They don't have a sense of worth. Why? Look at the policies of shutdown, mandates, masks that are not grounded in sociology, philosophy, science, medicine. So a lot of those policies led to this. But we're where we are today. And what do we do about it? It costs America about $1 trillion a year, drug overdose. The treatment for this, my brother, would cost us no more than about 15, 16%. The data has shown, the statisticians say. What I will do as a leader is seek to address the root causes of this and work with other very important stakeholders, including my high performance team, to make sure that people have the resources. Guess what? One of the most common causes of death in our children is suicide now. And if you look at that, it's failed leadership in many ways. The parents are suffering, mothers are suffering because of bad policies. And our children are killing themselves. Every child, as I said before on your show, needs to be in a socially healing environment of a classroom. Our leaders knew this within 3 months. Let's be objective. You can't accuse anybody of mismanagement or poor leadership within the first couple of months of a pandemic. But within 3 months, we had the data to understand what are the risk factors in this. The science told us, yet stubbornly, our leaders continued down a treacherous path that led to our children where they're not killing themselves. Where I have Heidi, who lives in Warren County, says her daughter came to her and said, 13-year-old, Mommy, We went a month without somebody committing suicide. That's horrible. So I will address the root causes. We will have a science and medicine and sociology-based, knowledge-based type of leadership. Critical thinkers whose primary motivation is to serve. And then I will provide the resources, the psychologists, treatment resources across the state in our counties. I've been to counties where the drug problem, I went up to Elk County. A lot of people who take overdose in drugs. And these are Americans. These are fellow human beings. They are brothers and sisters. Well, I'll make sure they get those resources, sustainable resources, to help them deal with this situation in the state.
Doctor, I'll close with one final question, only because I think it's probably something that you can speak to and you care deeply about, and that's the subject of immigration. We hear again at this hour, border agents are saying that they anticipate another huge surge of illegal migration, and it shows no signs of abating. In fact, the President of the United States even referenced it while he was over in Poland, likened what was going on with the movement of Ukrainians under duress to the volume of people coming across our southern border, which was kind of amazing to say aloud. But nevertheless, a lot of these folks we hear are being shepherded, transported, flown to lots of places around Pennsylvania, flown into Philadelphia International Airport, bused to various communities around the Commonwealth. What do you have to say? What do you think about illegal migration in this country and kind of the movement the federal government is transporting these people into states like Pennsylvania and communities?
You know, I love America. This is the greatest country in the world. And sometimes fellow Americans just don't understand. They're not bad people. I've just happened the fortune of traveling the world a lot as a humanitarian doctor, and because of my profession. I speak about 6 languages, so I interact around the world. I've been to Norway, I've been to Japan, I've been to Chad in the Sahara Desert. But one thing I know is that I just can't show up and pitch a tent anywhere and say, hey, send me a check and I'm Norwegian now, and every sovereign nation has the right to protect its borders. People forget that. Having porous borders, when you have a leader who stands up and says, we got to secure our borders, and everybody's saying, no, throw them open. And I have to tell you, a lot of the people that say throw them open are people who are economically doing great. And I have to say that because as a doctor who has seen suffering, poverty, destitution, more than most people around me, if I look at the broad spectrum of my life from childhood to where I am today. And I have seen our veterans who've lost limbs in wars, who can't even afford a couple of meals a day. I have to pay for their medicine. I've got mothers who can't even afford to buy drugs for their children, and I've had to pay for it. But we're not a poor country. We've got veterans sleeping on the bridges, and the elderly who are suffering. Mothers who have to make the choice between buying insulin or putting food on the table. Yet we're spending millions on illegal aliens. I will never support it. Never. Charity begins at home. You got me really going with this emotional.
I thought I might.
I mean, charity begins at home. I want to be the guy that fights for the people here. We're talking about our school systems. Look at Philadelphia. There are only 5 to 6% of the teachers in this state are African American or minority. Yet we talk about a school system that is screwed up, but we're spending millions taking care of others that voluntarily choose to leave their countries. Only about 4% of the doctors in here, in this state, are minority, black. And this has been the same percentage for a zillion decades. Instead of saying, how do we fix these social ills? People up, farmers, the cost of fertilizer has doubled. Urea, I travel the counties, the farmers are suffering. Yet we keep concentrating on illegal immigrants and spending money on them. Well, I tell you what, charity begins at home. I say you need to wait where you came from, come here legally, but I want to concentrate on Americans to take care of them in our state. And I want to make this a sanctuary for every legal American who's worked hard to build this country, to build this state. And they deserve the best.
And
they don't
there's
deserve
no finer authority in this election, I don't believe, than you. And you know what you're talking about because you've lived it. Dr. Nche Zama, if people wish to be helpful to your campaign, we've got the information up on the screen, or we had it up and we'll get it up there again. If you'd like to donate to Dr. Zama, if you'd like to reach out and I suppose volunteer your time, you're still accepting that assistance, right, Doctor?
Oh, yes. We need, if there's no money, no mission, if you like our campaign supporters, this is, we're on a mission here to transform this state. I can't do it alone. I need all of you. And I don't have all answers, but you are part of that high performance team, as I said many times. And collectively, we can make this state what it ought to be and leave a legacy for our children. I can't do it by myself, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you for your time tonight, Doctor. I hope you'll come back and talk with us before the campaign's over.
I would love that.
Dr. Nche Zama, my name's Chris Stigall. That'll do it for us tonight. We'll be back again next Monday at 7 p.m. I'll be back live tomorrow at 6 a.m. on Philadelphia's AM 990 The Answer. Thanks for watching. Good night.
Good night.